I remember sitting top of the mountain. I made a commitment to myself that I'm not going to be afraid of anything, even death. So as long as I'm not afraid of death, I can do anything.
The early history of the Chinese in Canada is a story of pain and prejudice. Chinese were paid a fraction of what whites made, were not allowed to vote or even swim in public pools. From 1923 to 1947, new Chinese were not allowed to immigrate, which meant there were thousands of Chinese men who had no hope of family here and no means to return to China. The opportunity for change came with World War II, when Japan, Germany, and Italy tried to take over the world. They would have been successful had it not been for the Allies, Britain, France, Canada, and the USA. Every able-bodied person wanted to defend their country, including Chinese in Canada. However, even here, racism reared its ugly head. The BC government initially denied Chinese entry into the military. However, with mounting casualties and lobbying from young Chinese wanting to prove themselves, the government reversed their policy and Chinese began to participate in the Army, Navy, and Air Force. One of these young men was Herbert Thomas Aquinas Lim. His story is both special and symbolic of the struggle for equality for all Chinese.
I went to UPC, I think, 1942, joined up with COTC, Canadian Officer Training Corps, for 1 year. At the end of the 1 year, 44, I think 43, I was interviewed by a British Colonel Legg, L-E-G-G. He asked me if I wanted to volunteer because I was Chinese, and they need Chinese people, because they'd gone through all the Chinese in Hong Kong, Singapore, Indonesia, Siam, and they found they're not what they wanted, because all they wanted to do was play mahjong. They weren't interested in helping the British out. The British government approached the Canadian government about conscripting the Chinese in BC, because most of the Chinese were in BC. But they were reluctant, the government that was, reluctant to conscript the Chinese because they were afraid that then we didn't have votes in those days, eh? So they were afraid of the vote, give us a vote. So really they didn't want to conscript it. Anyway, finally they conscripted about 200 Chinese from BC for this special operation to jump behind the enemy lines in Malaya for the reinvasion or retaking of Singapore.
With the Secret War, you had two broad elements. One would be the people collecting information, the spies, collect the information without the enemy knowing and get the information back. The other side were those who actively created havoc behind enemy lines, training local guerrillas, or blowing up things, or assassinating important enemy, just making it very physically uncomfortable for the enemy behind his own lines.
He said, we need Chinese bodies to jump behind the enemy line. But one thing he said, the chance of you coming out of it is not easy, not good. He laid that on the line. So it's okay,
This pivotal decision for the Chinese to fight for Canada, despite not having rights of citizenship, would change Canada forever. As a university student, Herb was exempt from military service, but Herb and his fellow Chinese had none of this. All they knew was Canada. Their Canada was at war, and they were going to defend her. Herb joined a group of 30 in the engineering camp in Chilliwack.
Engineers are supposed to be first in and last out. Engineer has to go first to decommission all the mines and the obstructions and blow up the obstacles. In the engineer camp is learning a little about explosives. So I learned all about explosive more, like booby traps, landmines, blowing up bridges, blowing up train tracks, electrical equipment, all weapons. We went through exercise like tear gas, nerve gas, mustard gas. We had to go through all that just to experience this. They lock us in the room, make us run around, and then drop tear gas into the room. They wanted to breathe the tear gas and experience the conditions. You cannot wear your mask after they say your mask. Meantime, your eyes are in tears, you're coughing, choking, tear gas, I know, and that's right, unless you experience, you can't explain a choking sensation. You cannot see, your throat is dry, eyes are weeping, you cannot breathe, your lungs are burning, tear gas sensation. What they call the weapons, 3-day shooting course, rifles, pistols, Sten guns, Bren guns, 3 days test. After that, I was the only one out of the 30 that qualified for cross rifles. Just a cross rifle will mean you're a sharpshooter. Cross rifle with a star, it means you're marksman. Cross rifle with a crown, you're expert marksman. Not too many people can wear that. After 7 weeks of training, you're supposed to take advanced training before you go overseas. But we were in such demand in those days. After 7 weeks, they wanted to go overseas. That's why after 7 weeks, I was supposed to go to for my officers training corps, OTC. There's already in there. 3 months, I would have done my first. I would have been commissioned as second lieutenant. 6 months, I would have been commissioned as a first lieutenant with 2 pips. But this, before we left Chilliwack, or could leave Chilliwack, this British officer came to me again, interviewed me. He said, "Herb, don't go back east for your commission. Come with us on this to India, then I'll give you a field commission." Our old bunk beds on the troop ship could be 9-10 levels high, but 24 inches in between, and the bunk only 24 inches. We had to keep on our uniform, our life preserver, no bathing. We had to leave our uniform on for 7 days. Then from Halifax to London, but from Southampton to Bombay through the Suez Canal, 30 days, living like this, sleeping like this. We had to wash, if we could wash, we wash with salt water, not with fresh water, salt water. Even our clothing had to be washed in salt water. You imagine the stink in the ship when they get 15,000 troops all sweating and all vomiting and pooing and peeing. When you go through that, they deserve to pay $15 a month Canadian, with all your weapons, sleeping that one little bunk, and including your shoes, all your equipment, and life preserver. Now, most people cannot imagine the conditions you had to go through. Do this for a whole month, from London through the Suez Canal to Bombay. From Halifax to London, only 7 days, but all going through the submarines. But we went through from London through the Suez Canal to Bombay, still submarine too. But we survived. But London was fantastic. The blackout in London. Imagine everything was blackout and a little bit of light in the car were blacked out. But the atmosphere is different. Because wartime atmosphere, be happy and live. Because everyone's going to die.
In London, the Canadians did not stay in the army barracks. They were hidden in with the civilians in residential apartments where they studied advanced weaponry, explosives, and coding. One day when Herb and the group were out, the apartment was blown up. This near disaster helped give Herb a taste of the danger of the Special Operations Executive, that special group that was to infiltrate and wreak havoc behind enemy lines.
And in the Far East, SOE had a branch called Force 136, which was to operate in Asia, and it would operate wherever the Japanese had occupied territory, be it Burma, Malaya, the different China, whatever countries they had to do the fighting in. The Chinese Canadians was an almost unique resource that they could blend in the Far East, and one of the target countries was Malaya, which has a very large Chinese population. So someone like myself would not be able to walk into a city in Malaya where the Japanese were, because I would be spotted right away. Whereas another Canadian of Chinese ancestry, as long as they could speak the language, could walk in and interact with the local population, and then leave again without being detected.
For the final phase of training, the group had to go to where conditions would be similar to where they would be parachuted into. They took a boat to Bombay and traveled 150 miles southeast to Pune.
Then our training really began. The Signal Mountain is about 4,000 feet high, more than like Grouse Mountain. We had to climb that mountain at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The temperature may be 115 degrees there. You know, just to walk up the mountain. Some of the guys took over 12 hours to walk the mountain. But at that time we got to the top. I was number 3 up top. The walls of this fortress was 15 feet thick. It was impenetrable. Legend had it that only way that fortress was entered was they used a monkey with a rope, and they used a young boy with a rope to get up there and open the gate to attack the fortress. The food was terrible. The food was like that. I didn't tell you. The rice was full of moving weevils. I thought when we eat the bread, the black piece in the bread, I thought they were raisins, but they were bugs in the bread. No, I told you that the Herbert, and the string beds they used in Singar were full of bed bugs. We've been 100 times over with these bed bugs till we could not sleep. Terrible.
Living conditions are bad for everyone, but what was particularly painful was that they were not allowed association with the British soldiers who were also at Pune. This feeling of isolation helped toughen the men as they faced psychological conditioning.
They used 2 planks and how to get this body of a jeep right across the river. And they tell you how you lead, how you command, how you delegate. And there's one there where you climb a wall 10 feet high and not using any strings or rope. How do you use with 3 people? They test you how you delegate, how you command, how you overcome this obstacle. They call it obstacle course.
They had to be able to navigate using a map across mountains, through jungles, whatever. They had to be able to do basic medicine to repair themselves, patch themselves up until they could get to a doctor. Some of them were trained to use vehicles. Radios were very, very important because without communication you had chaos. So people providing the radio links back to headquarters was important as a two-way communication method. So those are all elements of basic soldier training.
From there we went to Meerut, which was the original British signals base. We went to a compound isolated from the rest of the British Army. It was a 6-month British signal course, reduced to 15 weeks. Each week consists of 1-week course. We're supposed to do code, not in plain language, 25 words a minute. Each word is 5 letters, so it's 115 letters a minute. You have to transmit and receive in code. For plain language, you can do that at 35 words a minute in plain language. But in code, you're lucky you can do 25 words a minute. Not too many people can do that. I qualified in 7 weeks.
The final step of training was the most treacherous: parachute jumping. You had to do 3 jumps, and the expected casualty rate from death or injury was 35%. They traveled to a secret Air Force base called Dum Dum.
To begin with, I'm terrified of heights. That's inherited. All the way from the family. My fear of height is, when I step on the fire escape or my feet start to shake. With 1 parachute, 600 feet high from actually Dakota. Left side, 5 of us jumping. When I jump, the first 3 seconds, free fall, 125 feet per minute, a mile per minute. That's terminal speed. Before the chute opens up, I'm dying, I'm dead. But when it opens up, I'm reborn. Fantastic feeling. I remember hearing the other guy actually singing. So happy. Maybe they were reborn like me. Then, this is evening, moonlight night. Then as you drop farther down, closer to the ground, everything is black. You cannot see the ground. My first jump, when I landed, I was oscillating. I landed backwards. I was knocked up for 2 hours. They could not find me. Actually, lucky. They were looking for me in the dark, in the jungle.
The subsequent jumps were even worse, and Herb also learned to jump from B-24s in the chute. This grueling training process over 3 continents had weeded out many. Some quit, some were disqualified because they did not volunteer for parachute training. Those that were left were the elite, and Herb and his comrades were ready for action. They traveled to Ceylon. Knowing chances of success were slim, they prepared for the worst.
And then we drew all our equipment, like gold watches, gold coins, pills, L pills. For me, L pill, eh? No uniform. Burmese skirts, not uniform, not Canadian uniform. Nothing to signify whether we're Canadian or Army or British. Nothing. So we were caught with either I take the pill or straight execution right away. You know, I told you my friend went in 1 month after the surrender. Bill Lee, BK, the other wireless operator. BK Lee, he went into the Japanese headquarters, and on the map, he saw all I kept pinpointed exactly where we were. To be captured, annihilated at the end at the sign of invasion. And he said, Herbie, you're lucky the war didn't finish at that time, otherwise you guys would be all gone.
Then the unexpected happened. The Americans dropped the atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Japanese realized there was no point in continuing their path of destruction.
When I heard about the surrender, I was actually in Ceylon, in the jungles, VJ Day, finishing off our training, drawing up equipment ready for to drop in the next full moon, which was supposed to begin in September the 6th, I think. When I heard about the surrender, some people were ecstatic. I was kind of disappointed, I hate to say that. I was disappointed because I was training all these years, all this time, just for this one thing, and it collapsed. It was disappointment and happiness because at least the war ended, nobody's going to die. I don't like wars to begin with. I don't like seeing people die. Even Japanese, they die for nothing. Not for nothing, but they die for the country. Death is not good.
What their participation in the war accomplished was that 2 years later, in 1947, the Chinese would be given full rights of citizenship in Canada. Mission accomplished. However, their exploits would not be told for decades. Why? The soldiers had to stop at London before returning to Vancouver. Herb, because he knew the code, had to sign the War Secrets Act, promising that for 25 years he would not reveal any details of his training.
I was silenced for 25 years. I could not say anything. What I did, where I went, to identify any of my job in the event for, otherwise they put me in jail. Criminal offense. I had to sign the act before they let me leave London. They put us on a boat, not a boat, a ship. Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mary. But the conditions almost the same, with the tier bunks, 2 meals a day, but it'll take 4 days for the Queen Mary to cross the Atlantic.
However, time of service was not quite over yet for young Herb. There was still a massive cleanup operation left, and people with his special skills were in demand.
The only reason why I got into the Navy is because my friend came up. He said, "We got a boat up here. Can I leave for Shanghai until we get a wireless guy?" Offered me $1,000 a month plus return fare, airfare. I got to Shanghai. The captain asked me to stay, so I stayed for another 2 years. Trained 2 radio officers. It's the best time of my life. I'm glad I made that trip, because I learned a lot of things. Shanghai after the war was in chaos. There were a lot of people dying from sickness, robbery, death, murders. They did not even bury the dead. They just shoveled them in the Wangpo River. You see the boat, the body floating around, face up, facing up, stomach open, no eyes, no lips, no mouth. It was a trying time in Shanghai. But life is so cheap at that time. I learned a lot.
Herb hooked up with Chinese-Canadian pilot Cedric Ma, who took him to Hong Kong. From there, Herb came back to Canada. Herb went on to have a successful career in business and family. After the war, Herb was able to pursue two of his passions, flying and diving. Herb was an excellent pilot who soloed in 5.5 hours and got his license after only 10.5 hours, and night endorsement after 12. Always an excellent swimmer, Herb went scuba diving around the world, including a special trip with his sons to the South Pacific.
Queen's Diamond Jubilee, awarded to Herbert T.A. Lim.
Not only was he able to look death in the eye and survive, his legacy, like that of his World War II brothers, was to make Canada a place where Chinese can proudly take their place in the Canadian mosaic. Truth be told.